So good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Sharon Allred, co-founder of Signature Recruitment and director for the Bristol office. Firstly, happy International Women's Day. Today marks the call to action to accelerate women's equality. As a female-founded organisation, this is really close to our hearts. It's been great already this morning to see so many other organisations working hard and championing breaking the bias with us. Today, I'm going to be handing you over to my colleagues Victoria and Abigail, who between them have 11 years experience working within recruitment, specialising specifically in education, construction, professional services and FMCG. After speaking with their clients and finding that many are experiencing very similar frustrations in terms of finding suitable candidates, they've put together their top tips on how to secure the best candidates in a vacancy-rich market, which is quite specific. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions throughout, so do feel free to put questions in the chat box, and then when we finish a particular point, we'll come back to those. So now I'll hand you over to Victoria.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sharon. Morning, everybody. Today, as Sharon's mentioned, we're going to be looking at some practical tips on how you can secure the talent you want within the current market. So we're going to use some real examples from some of our clients so we can show you how to learn from their mistakes, but more importantly, from the things that have gone well as well. We're going to cover today planning, so planning the process, the importance of speed and where you can save time, dealing with your deal breakers that you can consider, knowing what your unique selling point is, and also what to look out for with your competition. But before we go into the details of these tips, it's worth looking at the current market conditions, as if you've been recruiting for any vacancies in your organisation over the past few months, I'm sure you would have felt some of these changes. So what we've got going on right now is two things: more jobs and less people applying. So the UK has had a record number of job vacancies, but there's a much lower rate of candidates unemployed or looking for new job opportunities. This graph and the findings from the Office of National Statistics show us that the number of unemployed people per vacancy fell to 1.2 in October last year, which is the lowest on record. So essentially, for every role you want to fill, there's only one person looking to fill it. This has been driven partly by the increase in vacancies available. According to the latest jobs outlook from the REC, job vacancies in the UK continue to break records, with an average of 1.25 million vacancies across October to December last year, which is 109% higher than a year earlier. But also the much lower number of people available per vacancy is also due to the reduction of people actively looking for work. So let's have a quick look at where they are and what are they doing instead. Firstly, lower migration. According to the Institute for Employment Studies, between a quarter and a third of labour shortages in the UK can be explained by lower migration and the reduced availability of overseas workers. I'm sure we all remember headlines at the end of last year being dominated by worker shortages in areas such as HGV drivers, but new data shows that now the whole economy is being affected by the lack of workers. Another factor is that a lot of young people are staying in education instead of entering the labour market, or people are returning to education to study a new subject or complete a master's. During the pandemic, for many, it felt pointless to look for new work. So many did decide to return to education with the hope that prospects will be better when they finish their studies in the next year or two. And also lifestyle choices in response to the pandemic have also impacted the labour market. I think we'll all agree that never has work-life balance been more talked about, especially in the workplace. And many of those nearing retirement took the opportunity to retire early, which again will create even more vacancies and fewer job seekers. So with all of this in mind, how can we help ourselves? So the first step is to plan the process. So as with any project, planning is the key to a smooth operation and positive outcome. Now, I know for most of you, this will be an obvious place to start. However, I recently had a client who needed a temporary candidate to start work the following week. And due to the nature of the role, an interview was going to be necessary. The role really needed to start on the Monday so that the temp could have a day's handover with somebody who was going to be leaving the team. The client had time in their calendar to interview that Thursday, then make a decision and offer on the Friday, ready for the candidate to start work the following Monday. But the part they hadn't considered was that they were actually going to be on annual leave until the Wednesday, the interviews. This ended up delaying the whole process by 24 hours, which I know might not seem like a long time, but it did mean that the new starter missed out on their day's handover. Abby, have you had similar experiences of this in London?
Yeah, actually, so maybe like another, I guess we'll go with like a recent example where there was like an oversight in the planning, which meant losing a front runner candidate, was when a candidate was actually verbally offered a role, but as there was a delay with sending out the official offer, like the confirmations, the candidate then actually accepted another opportunity with another company. The hiring manager at the time had considered the turnaround needed by HR to process the job offer and send it out to them, which ultimately meant that the preferred candidate went elsewhere in the end.
Oh, gosh. So feeling that planning piece, definitely important. But the good news is though, this can be easy to fix. So we'll start with looking at how to do it. So how to do the planning. So firstly, with recruitment process, always start with the end in mind and work backwards. So think about, when do you need the role to start? Could you wait for somebody on a month's notice, or is there a more urgent need? This is going to dictate how quickly you need to review the CVs and book the interviews. You also want to think about who's going to be involved in the recruitment process and if anyone has any holidays coming up. So think about who's going to be reviewing the CVs and providing feedback, who will be involved in interviews and providing feedback, who has final sign off, and also who will send out the contracts and what information are they going to need and by when. Agreeing all of this at the beginning will allow for a smooth and efficient process from start to end. This might sound like common sense. However, as we've seen, it's the little details that can make the difference between, so taking the step back to consider every step of the process and everyone involved from start to finish will stop you from missing out on that talent for the wrong reasons. Consider also IT and the practicalities of IT setup and desk space. A lot of my clients are finding that setting up IT is taking longer than in the past because there's more to do. So making sure that you're speaking with IT to let them know that you are recruiting and expecting a new starter, and checking with them what information they're going to need from you to avoid any delays. Up to, I think it's about nearly 80% of the candidates that we've placed so far this year we've seen they've had a start date delayed due to waiting for IT departments to complete those new starter setups. So getting ahead of anything that could delay somebody starting is going to be vital. And of course, the benefits to the planning. A well-planned process with clear timescales, deadlines, and responsibilities is going to allow for a quicker turnaround, which will reduce the delays in feedback and next steps with your candidates. This is going to give your candidates a better experience of the recruitment process and ultimately a greater first impression of your organisation as a whole. In such a competitive market, this could be the difference between a candidate you want or signing your offer. Remember that as much as you're making decisions about the candidates, they're definitely making them about you too. So now more than ever, it's important to think about how you as a brand are perceived. Amazon take this point very seriously, I know, and it's written into their contracts with the agencies working with them that every single applicant must have feedback, whether successful or not, as they know that every person they interact with could be a potential customer of theirs. You're also going to be far more likely to fill the role first time around, so you can avoid the pain of getting to offer stage, losing a candidate, and then having to start from scratch, which I'm sure you'll all know can be both costly and disruptive to the team. So that's the planning part. Now it's looking at the importance of the need for speed. So good candidates are likely to have multiple job applications. So keeping the time from when they apply to when they get CV feedback or interview feedback or a job offer will reduce the risk of you losing them to another company who could get back to them sooner. And in the world of recruitment, 24 hours is a long time, and that could really mean the difference between your offer being accepted or rejected. So it's really important that you don't delay. Abby, I know you mentioned when we were talking earlier that you've seen this with some of your clients quite recently.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this example actually I could share is we had this excellent candidate who had a 2-stage interview with one of my clients. My client was ready to make the offer, which was great, but last minute they decided they wanted the candidate to meet another colleague because they would be working really closely with them. The colleague was off on annual leave then for 2 days, so that short gap, which is literally just 2 days, but I did kind of advise the client that the candidate had another process on with another company, so they may miss out. But we waited the 2 days and the candidate did get snapped up with an offer from another process. So yeah, 24 hours, 48 hours is a long time, yeah, in that market.
Definitely. So some ways that we'd recommend that you can help to speed up the process. Firstly, sticking to the timescales and deadlines that you set up in that original planning stage at the beginning of the process is definitely going to help. As Abby's just mentioned, a last minute change of plan can have a huge impact and not always for the better. It's definitely not all time wasted and lost candidates though. I'm working with a hiring manager at the moment who always sets deadlines for every stage of the process, even adding them to their calendar and their team's calendars too. They block time out for every stage, from reviewing CVs with the team, giving CV feedback and scheduling interviews. From the start of the application process, the candidates know when they can expect feedback and when interviews will be, so they can already clear time in their diary should they be successful and invited to interview. By sticking to these agreed deadlines, they always have a smooth process. There's a positive experience for candidates and it doesn't eat into the rest of their day too. If you let it, recruitment can become a full-time job. That's for me and Abby to look after. But when you've got your day jobs to do as well, sticking to allocated time will help keep the right balance. Think as well about your interview process and the number of stages you have, and reducing this to one stage only where possible. If you've got multiple people who would need to meet with candidates, I recommend having all involved at the same stage. Assessments and tasks can be a great way to help screen your applicants in place of a second stage interview. And you could even organise for these to be completed before first stage interviews. This will allow you to have all the information needed to base your decisions on by the end of the one stage interview. Consider as well any holidays or non-working days of anybody involved in the recruitment process too. Anything that could slow down that time from the candidate application to the next stage in the process could cost you the right candidate. So again, by incorporating this into the planning at the start will give you the best opportunity to not miss out on the right candidate. Sharon, have we had any questions in the chat box, the Q&A box so far?
Do you know what? We haven't from today yet, but I did have some questions messaged to me earlier, if I could go to those. What would you do if you had your interviews already booked and then at the last minute another applicant with better experience on paper applied, but they couldn't interview for another week?
Sure. I don't mind taking this one. Cool. So yeah, I would just probably suggest that communication is definitely key with this. So I'd keep the first candidate updated on when you're likely to kind of make a decision, speak with the candidate, see if they could maybe meet sooner. Obviously we've got lots of flexibility now with Teams and Zoom. So kind of try to bring that interview forward. It's also worth asking the candidates what other interviews they've got may have booked, so you have like a likelihood of how likely they would be to accept the role. So you're not waiting for a candidate who looks great on paper but may have kind of lots of other interviews going on also, and you don't want to run the risk of losing the original candidate for someone that may have lots of processes on or may not be the right fit in the end actually.
Yeah, no, really good points. And to speed up the process, would you recommend doing a phone interview or Teams rather than face-to-face?
Ooh, I'll take this one. So I would always say if the role is going to be office-based and permanent, where possible, I would recommend face-to-face, as seeing the office for the candidates, meeting who they're going to be working with in person. It's going to create more buy-in from the candidates, as they're going to have a better feel for the job and what being part of the team will actually be like. It's also going to allow for rapport building, which will give you an advantage over companies who are staying with teams interviews. But for temporary roles, I would recommend where you can phone or Teams for speed, so as not to lose candidates to another role. So depending on temp or perm, but yeah, temp, speed, perm, I'd go for the relationships and rapport building where you can. Great.
Thanks, guys.
So I'll hand over to Abby, who's going to take us through some more tips and tricks.
Cool, thanks, Vix. So the next one, so what are your deal breakers? So when you're picturing your ideal candidate, it's always important to have the thought of what are your deal breakers. So what I mean by this really is what you could be flexible on. This would be what we would describe as what is desirable and what is essential. This is a particular consideration in a candidate short market, and by having written down what is essential, these nice to have will enable you to consider other candidates from the start of the process. So basically what I've done is I've narrowed it down to think about these deal breakers from the start. So number one, we've got skills and not sector. So with the past 2 years, we have seen many people retraining, entering different job markets, and I bet we all know someone who has just come into the team and has been great at the job, which is from a different sector. So firstly, to consider what skills are important to you, what are transferable, and in this in turn will make your process very inclusive. Next one then is simple really, what can be trained on? Do you need someone with specific experience, whether it be a qualification, a specific CRM, or can this be trained? Is there something else more important to you? And knowing this from the start will prevent you from missing out on a candidate you may not have previously considered. Third one then is, has your essential and desirable criteria changed since you last recruited for the role? So make sure really you check your job adverts. Does anything need updating? Have you mentioned about your working from home model? Are you now hybrid? Is it a deal breaker if your candidate lives within your area, or are you now open to like fully remote as well? And then the fourth one is think about the attitude/character traits that are important to you. Who is a superstar on your team and organization? What is it about them? And what were they like when they first joined you? Don't you agree, Vix?
Oh, definitely. A lot of my clients ask me for another John, for example, when we're hiring for a similar role that we've helped them with in the past. And more often than not, the candidates that they've loved are those that we've matched on skills and attitude rather than previous sector experience. And I always ask them to think back to what the candidate was like when they first joined the business too, because they're going to be different after being in the team, however many months or years, and having had training or learning on the job. So being able to separate the superstar that you have now to what they were like when they first joined might also help shine some light on where you can flex on what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Great point. And also previously we did send out to our clients a handout of how to write like a gender neutral job advert, just to ensure your adverts are inclusive and encourage applications from a wider pool of candidates. So please do get in touch at the end of the webinar if you'd like a copy of that as well. So then going on to what is your unique selling point. So I've spoken to many candidates now that are looking for more than just a salary nowadays. If anything, the pandemic has shown us when it comes to work is that people are wanting balance and a healthy work-life balance at that. So this is always a great idea, a great way to showcase your unique selling points. So what makes your company great? This is a good time to update your job description, updating your job boards, and also updating your consultant if you are working with an agency on what you can offer. So I've gone through this with a lot of my clients, even down to like fruit bowls, a great coffee machine, or just perks you may not see as perks are things you should be mentioning, so do mention them. And I remember when I was 24 and I was working at TripAdvisor, they had a free vendor machine with unlimited Diet Cokes and chocolate, and I really thought I hit the jackpot. But you never know what people are looking out for. So I'll go through some points of where to start with this, as I'm sure not everyone else would be as kind of easily pleased as I was at the time. So firstly, I'd say check with HR. This will be for like holiday days. Have they changed? Obviously, we've got that one extra one for the Jubilee this year. The second point then, really like what else do you offer? So fruit baskets, cycle to work, wellness days, courses, Obviously, like, what are your company values is such a huge thing. What is your sustainability policy? What do you do for charity? What impact are you making socially or for the environment? So shout about these from the rooftops. It's certainly about the package you offer. Like, we get a lot of people nowadays as well, you know, asking for like a dog-friendly office. That would certainly get my attention, and you'd be surprised how many people ask for this as well. And then the last thing I'd say, like, why you're hiring, really. So always something that we see that's like left out on job descriptions, but when we speak with hiring managers, they would mention why. But I'd definitely put this maybe in your advert too. So especially if it's due to someone having a promotion, due to significant growth, winning a new grant or a client, or just expanding in general. So it's a great way to feel like you're entering an exciting time with a progressive company. Fab. So lastly, knowing your competition. So one of the biggest current trends is in hiring at the moment are candidates getting snapped up by other companies. So knowing your competition and looking into this from the start will make sure you are in the know of what other opportunities the candidates will have out there and what your competition is offering. So this will allow you to be realistic about who will be applying for your job and link it back to your deal breakers and where you can flex from the start. So what I'd kind of advise really is search job adverts and LinkedIn as if you're a candidate yourself. Put the job title, the job function and location and see what roles are available. Again, skills are not sectors, so it really is also important to know if another company is hiring the skills you want, what salary they are offering, what package they're offering. Also relating it back to skills are not sector, for example, you could be within a professional services recruiting for an admin role at 25k, and a construction company could be hiring for the same level admin role offering 27. So understanding that your competition when recruiting can be from like a bigger pool than what you thought of your day-to-day business competitors, really. So I'd always look at the job function as a whole and not just within the sector, as we all know that transferable skills really make a dynamic environment. So lastly then, if you are working with an agency or even on a temporary requirement where Vix and I usually assist, ask about the market, always happy to share what's going on. Great. So in conclusion, while there are fewer candidates applying for your roles, using a few simple tweaks and tips that have been discussed today will make sure you don't miss out on your favourite candidates. Hopefully you found this helpful, and we're now open for questions. So have any other questions come in?
We have, Abby. We've had some great ones come through. So Amy has asked, what depth of feedback do you think is necessary for unsuccessful candidates, say after the first interview? So these guys give quite generic but gentle rejection feedback. What would your advice be on that?
I don't mind answering that one. I would definitely say I've seen a lot more candidates wanting feedback. I do think as well, because they are going for lots more interviews, because there are lots of vacancies out there. I think a lot of candidates, as well as getting snapped up, they're kind of putting themselves out there. So we're getting a lot of candidates saying, could we have some feedback? So I don't think you have to go super in depth, but I'd probably highlight maybe what the front runner candidate got. Maybe they had more specific experience, or I'd probably give them a few lines of feedback that they can take on to the next interview, but not go too in depth, really, maybe a couple of lines. Would you agree, Vix? Just to help them for the next interview?
Definitely. I think if it's first stage, it's nice to give something specific to them where you can, to show that it's not just a templated rejection email that's gone out if you've taken the time for interview piece. But from first stage, I don't think it needs to be as detailed as if, for example, you're at sort of final stages with candidates. Yeah.
Great, thanks guys. So we've got a couple of questions from Kelly. So her challenge is that she's worried that her area and location will dry out with talent. So essentially it looks like Kelly's doing quite a big recruitment drive. So that's the context around this. So Kelly, the answer is yes, we have helped people with large number of vacancies. So my question to you guys is, what would your advice be in terms of breaking off the recruitment cycle to let the talent pool rebuild, or would you continue with the recruitment drive? They're going currently as far as 30 miles due to hybrid working available. And do you recommend any particular method that could support with such a large drive? So I suppose the first question being, would you suggest a break in a recruitment drive, and any specific methods? I mean, this might be something we could go into more detail with Kelly offline, but for everyone on this morning's webinar, what would your advice be?
I don't mind going. I guess I probably, with like large recruitment drives, you definitely had this, and with one of my clients before, obviously first depends what you're looking for. So in this particular example was one of my clients was looking for 8 graduates. So we did like an open day, and we made sure that we had the 3 stages that they wanted within a very short period of time. So maybe Kelly, looking at like your processes of how you've done the recruitment drives before. So were they all kind of bunched together? I think the radius is fine. And I maybe would say have a break, but it just depends really how many people that you're looking for, what you've already done. Have you done like an open day? Have you, like, how long have you had the advert on for? But I wouldn't be against a recruitment drive if it's been open for a little while. But yeah, definitely something we could talk about.
And I would add to that as well, referrals is going to be a really big way when you're looking for multiples, and depending on the type of role and the level of role, you might, I suppose, pitch it in different ways. But sometimes when we've had roles in the summer where we've needed lots of recent grad type profiles, then if we found a great candidate, who else do they know? Who are their housemates? Who are their friends? Who are their who's in their network? So referral schemes can be a great way when you're looking at a multiple of people for a similar vacancy.
Definitely.
Thanks, guys. I mean, I would second everything that you've just said there. I also think that it really depends on how long you're planning to recruit for. Is it a 3-month drive, or is it a 9-month drive to double the size of the team? So there's a lot of variables there, but we could certainly give more input. Are there any other questions? I haven't seen any come through. We'll just give it a few more seconds if there are. Oh, excellent. Here's a good question. Do we have any hidden job market areas that we would go to look for candidates besides Indeed and LinkedIn that we think are beneficial? I actually think, Victoria, your point just now about referrals is a real hidden. I mean, I think our rates in Bristol are about 30% of our placed candidates are coming from referrals, and they tend to be unique to us in a lot of cases. I may have stolen that answer, I'm afraid, guys. Is there anything else that you'd add, though, beyond LinkedIn and Indeed? Any kind of hidden gems, any additional places that people can go to find talent at the moment?
Yeah, one way that, and I think with being able to offer more hybrid working or flexible working, mum returners is a massive untapped market that pre-COVID just found it really difficult to get back into the workplace to fit work around the school run and part-time hours, but where companies now able to offer that more hybrid working or flexible working with more things going online, there's a great pool of brilliant candidates there who are desperate to get back into work but just haven't been able previously to find something that will fit around their lifestyle as well. So tapping into that sort of market, whether that might be through Mumsnet even, or again that might come through through referral schemes, but that's a great pool that's definitely worth looking into.
I suppose, again, one of the things that you mentioned earlier about the job ads and making sure they're gender neutral in the language that they're using as per our toolkit is also to make sure that you are covering the opportunity for flexible working in those job ads to make sure that these guys actually want to apply for your jobs and to work within your company. Okay, here's another one. Is it best to do an open day style interview, or to do them as the candidates come along? Thinking about speed, does waiting for a set day slow down the process, or is it better in the long run?
So I personally think from seeing when we've done recruitment drives where we've done an open day, they've been very successful. I think the only thing with the open day is because if you want them to actually come in, you might want to have two like days within the 1 week and the week after, but no more than a week, because maybe not even a week nowadays actually, but just because you need to keep the turnaround quite tight really. But I would say open days are pretty good.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think because it's taking it back to that planning piece at the beginning as well. So with you knowing when it's going to be and anybody else in your business who's involved, but also with the candidates. So whether you're on your job adverts, you can let people know this is the assessment day. So even if they don't know if they're going to be successful or not when they're applying for the role, if they're interested, good candidates will make sure they're going to be free on that day should they get invited. So letting them know that from that beginning stage.
And of course, an assessment day is a great opportunity for strong employer branding to really make sure that you get that time with the candidates to showcase your culture and what you're all about as an organisation, for everyone to check if that match is right for the long term, which should reduce your bounce rate. It's a lot more planning, but I think in terms of speed, it can be really effective.
Me too.
Okay, great. So thanks so much for everyone who's taken the time to join us this morning. Hopefully you found some useful takeaways. If there is any further information or advice that you'd like from us, we'd be delighted to share any other tips or information we have. Over the past 12 months, we've produced various pieces of information, complementary toolkits, market research as to what candidates are looking for. If you'd like any of that, please do feel free to get in touch. We'd be delighted to share any of that with you. We hope you found this morning useful. Please do take the time to fill in the feedback questionnaire when that comes over in the next 24 hours. For every feedback that's given to us, we will buy a child in poverty breakfast through our nominated charity Magic Breakfast. So we'll look forward to receiving your feedback through that. Have a great rest of day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.